How's it going, guys? My name is Brian Wang. For those who don't know me, I teach firearms classes professionally, and we serve several markets around the country. But anyhow, one of my students from many years ago, her name is Pamela, she sent me a Facebook message and with a question saying, Brian, what gun should I buy? And, she says, her daughter Tiffany, she says, Brian, what type of gun should I buy? Myself and Tiffany, if we want to continue shooting and taking your class, I want it to be precise and to stop a person in their tracks. All right, so this is a question I get all the time. I get this question every day, every class. I get this question. Anytime I'm working with beginners, I address this question. So I figured, let's just make a video and let's just put it out there, and that way I can reference this video in the future instead of going down the list and trying to articulate things because it takes a lot of time. All right, so basically you have to understand it boils down to 4 categories. There's really only 4 types of guns. There's pistols, there's revolvers. Now the 2 of them combined together form handguns, right? As in one-handed guns, as in short guns. So you have handguns, comprising of pistols and revolvers. You have rifles and you have shotguns. That's it. So pistols, revolvers, rifles, and shotguns. Of these 2, we have handguns that we talked about. Handguns are functionally speaking small rifles. They have rifle barrels. Something like this would be a quintessential handgun. This one right here is a Glock 17. It's chambered in 9mm. This is kind of the world's foremost standard in handguns. We use these a lot in our school. Not because they're good, but because they work. Not because they're pretty, but again, because they work. They're not super expensive. They're very durable, good aftermarket. They work, right? So when we look at long guns, right? Both rifles and shotguns fall in the category of long guns. So when we talk about long guns, you'll also hear me refer to them as two-handed guns. Now, of course, they look similar, they work similarly because you got 2 hands on them. You aim them similarly because you put them on a shoulder, you put your face down on the gun, but they shoot really differently. So the shotgun is a very specific tool. The rifle is also a very specific tool. They do 2 totally different things. So understand, there's 4 types of guns, right? Pistol, revolver, rifle, shotgun. They break down into handguns. Pistols and revolvers are handguns. Rifles and shotguns are long guns. Now, rifles and shotguns are very different. One has a rifled barrel, one has a smooth barrel. But pistols, all pistols, including small ones, big ones, small ones, old ones, new ones, young ones, whatever, they all have rifled barrels. So these rifles and these rifles are the same, functionally speaking. In other words, one's a little rifle that you use with 1 hand, one's a big rifle you use with 2 hands. They're both rifles. All right. So having made that clear, let's go over to why would you buy one? Why would you buy another? At what point do you use one? What's the purpose for it? Okay, so we're gonna lay out some scope here, scope and boundaries. Primarily, we're talking about the purpose of self-defense or surviving and prevailing and succeeding in human conflict, or the de-escalation or the successful, what do we call this? The successful abatement of human conflict? I don't know. So basically, winning in human conflict, not just living, not just surviving, but successfully ending human conflict, okay? Understand philosophically that there always will be human conflict. We're not going to go into that in much detail today, but we have to define what kind of human conflict we're dealing with, right? Specifically, we refer to crimes when we're talking about, common chit-chat about conflict, okay? So what are the crime are you actually trying to solve? All right, are you trying to solve tyranny from a government level? That's a kind of a different conversation than if you're talking about a burglary in your home or of your vehicle or carjacking or mugging. So let's bring this down very specifically into the actual crimes that you may encounter, right? The actual crimes that you are likely to encounter in society. In our school, typically we break them down into 5 things: rape, robbery, murder, mayhem, and kidnapping, right? 5 as far as the broad categories of heinous, violent felonies that you can use deadly force to stop somebody. I'm not saying this is the only crime that you'll face. What I'm saying is these are the crimes that you may face that you could conceivably use a gun to defend yourself from or stop. So Very specifically, those are only very few problems to solve. We're not going out there trying to solve crime in general. We're very specifically protecting ourselves from violent criminals doing very specific things. Rape, robbery, murder, mayhem, and kidnapping, right? So all of those are easy to define. Rape, robbery, murder, those are all done at close range, easy to define. Mayhem, I will define this. Frequently, you'll hear the word to maim. To maim and mayhem are basically the same word. One is the verb version, one is the noun version. So mayhem, you can think of it as to maim someone, or to beat someone up really bad, or to disfigure or cripple somebody very severely, or to injure someone so badly that they're unrecognizable by their mother, right? So when we say mayhem, you can commonly think of this as assault with a deadly weapon, aggravated assault, attempted murder. It's almost all the same thing. It basically means hurting someone really bad. They may not die, but they're hurt really bad, okay? Rape, robbery, murder, mayhem, and kidnapping. So all of these are close-range crimes. And unless we're talking about like an assassination, with some sniper in a building, something you see in Hollywood. Generally speaking, all these crimes are done very close, and generally speaking, all these crimes are done under ambush, under the disguise of ambush. So in other words, our human predator has a chance to pick the time and has the ability to choose the place, the time and the place. So it's not like something that we can, grab our big gun and be prepared and, say like, okay, I'm ready, bring it on, right? So it's something to really think about. All right, so having said that, let's get into more specific. So now that we understand the types of crimes we realistically can solve, when we're talking about self-defense crimes, there is the other side of things, which is when we talk about having a firearm for the purpose of civil defense or defense of the community. When we talk about defense of the community, really we're in the realm of military hardware. We're in the realm of rifles, okay? That's going to be pretty much the end of our scope of conversation for this particular video, because I know this topic can get quite deep, and I know this topic can easily get very long-winded. So let's go right into it. To decide what kind of gun you want to purchase, the first thing you want to ask yourself is, am I going to carry the gun? I don't know. I was thinking about carrying the gun. I don't know. I've never carried a gun. I didn't have a mentor or a role model who carried a gun. It seems kind of strange to carry a gun, right? Really, you have to define for yourself. Are you going to carry it, or are you not going to carry it? That's the first question that you need to understand, that you need to ask yourself. If you're going to carry it, obviously, we're going to be in the realm of handguns, maybe even the smaller types of handguns, but there is a significant warning that comes with these, okay? So realistically ask yourself, are you actually going to carry this every day, everywhere you go, okay? That's the first. The second point you need to understand is that guns don't do everything. Rifles do rifle stuff. Shotguns do shotgun stuff. Small pistols do small pistol stuff. Revolvers do revolver stuff. Handguns do handgun stuff. Or pistols, I should say, service pistols, big pistols do big pistol stuff. They're all for different tools. That's like if you came to me and you said, Brian, what kind of wrench should I buy? Well, I don't know, a 3/4 inch wrench with a ratchet on the end of it. Or, what kind of, if you tell me what kind of wrench should I buy? I don't know. What kind of bolt do you need to turn? Like, what kind of nut do you need to turn? Is it a pipe that you need to turn? Because obviously you shouldn't be, you got a whole special wrench for that. You see what I'm saying? Depending on your task, there's different tools. All right, so if you're going to carry the gun every day, you need to be honest with yourself a few things. Number one, how much you're going to carry it. Number two, how skilled are you with this gun? If you realize that you're not that skilled with the gun, you're still pretty new with the gun, then another aspect of being honest with yourself is realizing that you're not there to carry the gun. You're there to learn how to carry the gun, right? People confuse this all the time. They say, I want to buy the best gun, I want to buy the smallest gun, I want to buy the most high performance gun, I want to buy the fanciest, most technologically advanced, da-da-da-da-da. What they don't realize is that a gun is easy to use. The gun is just the same, it hasn't changed. But it's only easy to use if you know how to use it. From a professional trainer standpoint, I would tell you that it takes me about 4 days 4 whole days of training for me to bring someone who doesn't know anything about guns up to a level of expertise that I'm comfortable and confident that they can carry a gun and be useful using it in self-defense. We're talking about approximately 36 to 40 hours, between 32 and 40 hours of training for someone to be skilled with a handgun. Now, having said that, I think someone could achieve the same level of functional proficiency with a rifle in about 2 days, and someone can achieve the same functional level of proficiency in about 1 day using a shotgun. That's a big difference in time. That means compared to between this shotgun right here and this handgun right here, they do the same job if you're using it to solve the same crime: rape, robbery, murder, mayhem, etc. But the difference is 1 day of training versus 4 days of training to achieve a level of proficiency. Now, what people don't understand when I talk about proficiency, right? And people have a hard time wrapping around their mind around this because they've seen people use handguns in television or video games, forever. They don't realize that handguns are hard to use. They're difficult to use. So if you want to buy yourself a handgun because you're committing to carrying a handgun, you better go seek out that training. Not from me, maybe, because I'm not in your geographic area. Go find someone who can really teach you about how to use it. Someone who's a professional teacher, a professional educator in this field. Not just someone who, Joe Blow, who shoots a bunch of guns, who has a 16-hour NRA basic pistol certificate. I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but let me stand on my soapbox for a minute. NRA basic pistol certification does not qualify an instructor to teach you how to carry a gun in self-defense. The NRA basic pistol program says nothing about self-defense, has nothing about tactical anatomy, has nothing about the laws and the legalities of using a gun in self-defense, has nothing to do with shot placement, has nothing to do with terminal ballistics, has nothing to do with shooting technique. Someone can become an NRA certified instructor shooting however they want to shoot. So the NRA doesn't actually teach the instructors how to shoot. The instructors develop their own technique, and they go and they shoot a very simple test. Can you hit a target at 15 yards, X out of X times, X out of Y times? And then they get their certification to teach classes that does not qualify for them to teach you on how to carry a gun or how to use it in self-defense. That is not a good certification for this. That's like if you had someone who took a 16-hour class on how to brush their teeth, then go and be your dentist, right? Just because you know how to brush your teeth, you brush your teeth one way, doesn't make you qualified to do dentistry, for someone else who has a different tooth problem, and maybe their needs are different from the way you do it, right? I'm off my soapbox. Seek out competent training. If you're going to get a handgun, you need to have competent training with it. I was showing a couple, a husband and wife, just a couple days ago. We're going through this same exact conversation: pistol, revolver, rifle, shotgun. We spent a whole day on the range talking this over and shooting the different types of guns. We explained all this, and she's like, okay, cool, right? Not really fully registering what I'm saying to her. She loads the revolver. I talk her through the process of how to load the revolver. The first thing she does, she turns around and she goes like this and points it at me to talk to me. We had just a whole day of conversation about this, about gun safety, and about how using a handgun is more difficult and more complex and more tricky than using a long gun. And you don't process these things because it happens on the subconscious level. She nodded her head, understood all that, could talk to me and articulate to me what is gun safety, proceeded to load the revolver, turn around and pointed at me. It's because when you're stressed out, you're not thinking logically. And when you're holding a gun, you're shooting a gun, particularly when you're a beginner, or if you're in a stressful situation such as rape, robbery, murder, mayhem, and kidnapping, your brain is going to go out the window and you're going to be doing stuff in the subconscious level. So understand that handguns are more difficult to use, which means they're more difficult to be safe with, which means if you purchase a handgun, it is more likely for you to shoot yourself by accident or otherwise do something negligent with it. I'm not saying that because I don't like you. I'm not saying because I don't like handguns. I'm saying because I like you and I want you to be safe and I want you to fully understand what you're getting into. All right, so I think we've covered that enough. Handguns are like small rifles. They're not as good as rifles, okay? Handguns are rifles because they have rifled barrels, but they are weaker. They're more difficult to control. They're, generally speaking, less accurate, or at least they're very difficult to be accurate with. They're very difficult to hit your target with. Handguns are very difficult to be safe with. They're more tricky, particularly when we talk about semi-automatic pistols. They're more tricky for you to process in your mind what is the exact status of your weapon and what's the proper loading and unloading procedure. This takes very strict discipline and very high quality instruction for you to really get this so you're not making mistakes on firearm safety. Handguns are weak. Okay, you need to know this, and people don't get this when they're looking at buying a gun. They think a gun is a gun is a gun. Handguns are very weak, and so when you shoot somebody with a handgun, they are generally speaking not very effective. Okay. Tamla comes to me. She says, "I want to be able to shoot somebody and have that person, stop in their tracks." Well, if you want to shoot somebody and have them keep on fighting you, a really good tool would be to get a handgun. That's like using a squirt gun on a fire, right? Squirt guns can put out a fire if you squirt enough water at it, but generally speaking, squirt guns are not powerful enough to put out real fires, right? When we look at handguns can be used to employ deadly force in self-defense. But just because you employ deadly force doesn't mean that the person automatically stops, right? If you choose to use deadly force on somebody, that somebody can have two things. They can choose to stop what they're doing, or they can choose to not stop what they're doing. And with handguns, if they choose to stop, great. If you hit them in a good spot on the body, they will stop, great. But if you shoot them and they don't want to stop, they just don't stop. Just a couple of days ago, my brother killed a big pig, and he shot a bunch of times with handgun. They shot it a total of 17 times with various calibers. One round of 20 gauge buckshot, a bunch of 38 special rounds, a bunch of 45 caliber rounds, and this pig just wouldn't stop, and it just wouldn't die, and it kept on just trying to just go away, right? And so they kept on tracking it down and finding it, whereas it kind of got tired and sat down, and they'd shoot at it, and the pig would move again, and they'd have to track it again. And I'm talking about a pig. Remember, pigs and humans are very similar. We're talking about a big pig, but this pig absorbed lots and lots and lots of pistol bullets after it took a rifle round to the lung. Okay, so just because you think that all you need to do is get a gun, and a gun is a gun is a gun is all the same, that is not true. The human body is very, very resistant to gunfire, especially in the near term, the short term, within a few minutes. And you have to understand that when we're talking about crimes that you could use the gun to defend yourself against, we're looking at a few seconds that you need to be able to drop somebody and give him no choice but to stop doing what he's doing, all right? So if you want to use a handgun and you want to drop somebody, understand that your handgun is very weak. It's very hard to use. It's very difficult to be accurate with. Not to say it can't be done, but if you want to do it, you need to have a very high degree of discipline, a high degree of training, and a high degree of execution. Precision in your execution, which means you need to train, which means you need to be an expert user. If you hold a gun, you carry the gun, you hold the power of life and death for yourself, people around you, your family, and members of the public. So if you hold the power of life and death, you're judge, jury, executioner, you have power of God, however you want to articulate this. That means, can you just use this willy-nilly? You can't just get a little gun and put it in your pocket and call it good. It doesn't work that way, right? So that would be a good example of what is irresponsible as far as modern day usage of the Second Amendment, modern day usage of the firearm in a lawful manner. So if we look at handguns, approximately speaking, the only parts of the body that you can shoot somebody to drop them are the center of the face, about this size of a target, about a 3-inch target, center of the face. The softest part of the head is through the face, actually, underneath the eyebrow, above the teeth, and inside from the corners of the eyes. Gives you a box about 3 inches, about this big, that you actually need to shoot through to destroy the deep part of the brain. If you guys know me, you know I have a little ponytail right here. See this hair? Where that hair comes out of my head, that is your brain stem. And so the only time you can shut down a person like this with one bullet is by shooting him in the brain stem. I've killed many pigs in my life. The biggest pig I ever killed was with the smallest gun, with a 22 caliber rifle, and it was one round here behind the ear, in the center of the head, right? So my brother, back to the same one, he killed a pig with a tomahawk one time. That's just a pick, just a sharp spiky, and he actually struck it in the top of the head, and that dropped the pig because he hit it specifically in the right spot, the brain stem, right? So if you're using a handgun in self-defense, understand that there's very, very few and very small targets. Mind you, the rest of the skull is very well protected against pistol bullets. The teeth, the skull, generally speaking, will absorb or deflect pistol bullets with no significant ill effects in the short term against the human body. In the chest, the only target you have available to a handgun user is the heart, which is about this big, the size of your fist, right in the center of your chest. This is where your heart is. Destruction of the heart quickly leads to a low blood pressure situation, which causes the brain to reboot, causing the person to go unconscious, and then they lay down sideways. Now, this is what we want. Of course, this is what we call incapacitation. That usually involves a fatal injury, just so we know, just so we're on the same page. But we're not going into it trying to kill the person. We're going into this trying to stop them as quickly as possible. And in my experience, shooting a pig or a human in the heart, watching case studies and having personal experience with this, they normally will walk 2 or 3 steps before they turn soft like jelly and fall down, okay? So if we look at using a gun in self-defense, having a handgun can work, but it requires a good amount of precision. Okay, so let's go on. Let's move on. Let's compare. Shotguns. How is a shotgun different? How is a shotgun similar? Well, first of all, shotguns are smoothbore, which means they're not very precise. So we make up for, fundamentally, we make up for the lack of precision because these weapons are primitive by putting on a whole bunch of bullets. So we use a type of ammunition called buckshot. Okay, you can't see much in here. Maybe I'll get you some show and tell buckshot in a little bit. When we look at buckshot, think of it conceptually like a dozen pistol bullets at the same time. All right, so if we look at this one, a Glock 26 and 9mm, very common, very popular handgun for self-defense and concealed carry. The only problem I have with it is pretty fat, so it makes a bulge. Modern day guns, you can look at Glock 43s, Glock 48s, or similar sized guns. SIG P365. I'm not a big fan of SIGs, but whatever. There's a lot of good small guns out there that are very popular. If we look at that size category of gun, you know, they might hold around 10 bullets, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you can shoot at a bad guy. Understand that bad guys don't stick around, okay? At best, it would take you about 2 seconds to fire 10 rounds. So that's approximately how fast someone can shoot with a handgun, about 5 rounds a second. Now, it would take you 2 rounds to fire 10 rounds, or with this one right here, we have a 15 pellet buckshot. So with one pull of the trigger, I'll fire 15 rounds. And in 2 seconds, I could fire, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 shots, 4 maybe. Even if I fired them only 2 rounds per second. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, not that fast. We're looking at 60 bullets out at the same time that would take you the chance to fire 10, okay? Now back combined to the reality that handgun bullets are not very deadly, they're not very powerful, they're not very potent at stopping people. I understand that shotguns basically shoot small pistol bullets, and we call these buckshot. The biggest buckshot is a 9mm ball, triple aught. No one uses it for self-defense. The most common is called a double aught, which is an 8mm ball, which is fine. But honestly, I recommend going to a smaller buckshot, such as this one in this case is a number 1, which is a 30 caliber, 7.5, approximately 7.5mm ball. You can go down as small as a number 4 buckshot, which is a 6mm ball. And so what we're doing is we're putting a whole bunch of small pistol bullets at the bad guy at the same time. And you have to understand that caliber of your handgun, it almost doesn't matter. Almost. I say almost. The size of the hole, like for example, your body, do you have any holes in your lung? Yeah, I didn't think so, okay? Because if you had holes in your lung, you probably wouldn't be watching this video. So you probably have some other more important priorities. But if your body says, do I have a hole in my lung or do I not have a hole? That's what the body is concerned about. The body is not concerned, do I have a 4mm, 5mm, 6mm, 7mm, 8mm, or 9mm hole in my lung? The body could care less, right? What they care is, do I have a hole in my spleen? Yes or no. Do I have a hole in my gallbladder? Yes or no. Do I have a hole in my liver? Yes or no. Do I have a puncture in my artery? Yes or no. Do I have a hole in my heart? Yes or no. The body doesn't care how big that bullet is. So when we look at a shotgun is like a handgun with 10-fold productivity. And you can hold it with 2 hands and you connect it to your face. And so when you take a 2-handed gun, a shoulder-fired weapon, and you connect it to your body and you put your head down on this gun, you have a lot of control now where it goes. So you look at my eye, when I move my head around, the gun just goes with my head. So wherever I turn my head, wherever I point my finger, wherever I move my body, the gun automatically goes there. In other words, it's much easier to hit your target with a long gun, including rifles and shotguns. Okay, so we understand shotguns. Shotguns are very fantastic tools for human conflict fighting, okay, fighting at close range. And when I say close range, a stone's throwing distance is about as far as you can conceivably use the shotgun normally. Now this shotgun is loaded with something called flight control, low recoil 15 pellet, number 1 buck. It's a fantastic buckshot. It's one of my favorite buckshots that the industry makes. It's like the holy grail of buckshot. This shotgun is effective out to 100 yards. Because when I'm even out as far as 100 yards, if I'm putting 15 pellets on a person, I can still get, 6, 7 hits on a man-sized target at 100 yards out of 15 pellets. We're looking at 40 to 50% pellet strikes at 100 yards. That is very significant. And that's something that even most people with a carbine couldn't do, to shoot at somebody 15 times and hit them half the time, okay? But having said that, in general, when we talk about self-defense, we're normally thinking in the home or outside of the home. Obviously, we're missing kind of a big detail here, which is when you're looking at a long gun, rifles and shotguns, they're kind of hard to carry them around. I mean, you see right now all this talk about folks storming the Michigan Capitol or whatever, people demanding the end of the coronavirus shutdown. I mean, if I go like this and start walking around la-di-da, going to the store, guys, this is not Israel, this is not Switzerland. You can't just go walking around with your rifle like this without scaring folks. Even if it's legal, I'm not sure I would recommend that. There's a very specific time and place for bringing guns out into public space, and right now is probably not the time. So you can sense that already, that it's difficult to travel with a long gun, rifle or shotgun, although if you could, they'd be fantastic for self-defense. So understand that rifles and shotguns are better. Also understand that handguns are smaller and they're more convenient to carry in public. So let's say we understand shotguns, fantastic for close range self-defense, but they're kind of big, they need to be, stationary. So then the question is, are you gonna use your little carry gun for home defense or self-defense in the home? You could. And if you only wanted to buy one gun and you wanted to carry it, I suppose you'd get a handgun, and you would need to invest in the training and the time. If you're only going to get one gun and you were not going to carry it, what I would suggest is to buy yourself a small rifle, okay? A small rifle such as this one. So when we look at rifles, okay, generally speaking, rifles are big and long, and they were for frontline infantrymen to use against the enemy in the battlefield. When we look at carbines, carbines were normally for officers that rode on horseback, or cavalrymen who rode on horseback. They had short muskets. And then later on, as we mechanized during and after the Cold War, we realized that more and more warfare, modern warfare, is done in cities and done in vehicles. So if you're going to be riding in a vehicle and you're going to be fighting inside houses or down city streets, you don't need the big, long range and more power of a bigger rifle. You need the lightweight and compact and small size to fit in urban spaces. Well, guess what? All of you guys who are watching this video, even if you're cops or average civilians, or you may be in the military, but you're watching this video as a civilian choosing to buy your own gun, you're going to be operating in an urban environment. You got a house, you got a car, you live someplace with other people. That's an urban environment. So we can't necessarily make use of the extended range of the rifle. What we can make use of is the ease of handling. Rifles, if you have the proper training for it, a rifle like this is super easy to maneuver and move around, and is very, 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 very flexible in what it can do. Because you can use it for close fighting by tucking it in against your body. You can make yourself smaller and shorter compared to using a handgun. Or you can use it to reach out there and touch somebody at 300-400 yards, even with a tiny little rifle like this. So there's a concept kind of in the military sphere called the PDW, the personal defense weapon. Think about like a pilot who ejects out of his airplane behind enemy lines, and he packs one of these things out from under his ejection seat and he puts it together. It's got to be small and light, that he can be portable with it. It has to be easy to use, that someone who's a non-specialist can use it, and it has to be fairly capable at close range and at medium range. This is what we call the carbine, or the PDW, right? So this concept has been in existence in a long time, So I want you guys to heavily think about this. If you're thinking about buying one gun and you're not going to carry it, my recommendation would be it should be a light, small, easy to use rifle, something like this. But Brian, aren't AR-15s? Okay, yeah. Okay, sure. It doesn't have to be an AR-15. You can choose something else. But let's talk about the difference between men and women a little bit here. One of the key differences with women when you're choosing a gun is that you tend to have shorter arms, smaller shoulders or less broad shoulders, and you tend to have less well-developed upper body strength. So in other words, when we look at a gun like this weighs about 9 pounds, a man can pick this up without a whole lot of difficulty. He can pick this up and hold this, and he can absorb the significant recoil. And the length of the stock doesn't become a significant issue for the average size man. Because again, guns were traditionally the domain of men, so they're made to fit traditional size men. On the other hand, we look at the modern battlefield, either men that are wearing body armor and fighting in vehicles and buildings, or militaries and police departments that have more and more females in their ranks, we need to have a gun which is lightweight. This one only weighs about 6 pounds, including a very powerful, very nice surefire flashlight on it, allowing us for easy target identification. So we're looking at a gun that's significantly lighter. Right? When we add ammunition, this is a 7-pound rifle, whereas that gun is a 10-pound gun. That's a big difference. It may not sound like a lot of difference, but it is, because when you can shorten the stock, you bring the weight closer in against your chest. Therefore, it doesn't feel as heavy. Now, if I held this thing out over there at arm's length, even as strong and muscular as I am, this gun is going to become very, very heavy very quickly. But if I take the same weight and I put it against my chest like you'd hold a baby, I can hold this gun for a long time, several days, without receiving that much fatigue. Make sense? Okay, so I think you have a pretty good idea, but we haven't talked about the ballistics of a rifle compared to a handgun. Understand that people get shot by handguns all the time, and they don't stop doing what they're doing, and they live. They go to the hospital, they survive, no big deal. People don't get shot by rifles and then just walk away and do whatever they're doing. That just doesn't happen that way. Even for a small rifle like this .223 caliber, these little tiny caliber rounds, they're very small. Even for the .223 caliber rifles, such as what we're talking about, they're not very powerful as far as rifles go, but they are significantly more potent compared to the average handgun round, okay? So, shotguns, let's review. Shotguns are potent not because each pellet is powerful, but because it fires a dozen of them at the same time. Rifles, they're more potent because they only fire one small bullet at a time, but the bullet goes really fast. And when it hits water or hits tissue in our body, it releases that energy that it's carrying, causing massive tissue disruption other than what you just touched. Handgun bullets are like power drill bits, like they just kind of poke a hole. And hence, even though the bullets are big, they really don't do a whole lot of damage. Now, there's a few miscellanea here. By now, you should understand that if you want to carry the gun, you're going to need a handgun. Generally speaking, notice I didn't bring any revolvers out. I love revolvers. I have a lot of respect for people who carry revolvers, but the average user in today's world, so post-1990, is generally speaking not looking to carry a revolver. I'm not saying all you guys, I'm saying the average beginner who's looking to start with a gun is probably looking to train with the more modern semi-automatic pistol, okay? So, you need the training. If you get a handgun, go ahead, get one, get the training, understand its weaknesses, understand they're hard to use, hard to aim, hard to shoot, and they're not very powerful, they don't hold a whole lot of ammo. Understand that with a rifle, you're significantly better, even though they're functionally the same. But with a rifle, you need more knowledge, right? You need to know knowledge of ballistics, you need to know how to zero it, you need to know how to calibrate the sights, you need to understand your mechanical offset, so the distance between your front sight and the barrel, there's a distance there, so at close range, you're gonna miss low. You have to be trained on these things, and that's easy to get. You have to understand how to make it run reliably. For example, when we look at GI magazines, M16 magazines, these hold 30, but you're only gonna put 28 in them, which means thumbnail deep. I learned this from a school called Progressive Force Concepts in Las Vegas, the thumbnail deep portion. So they had a great way of explaining it. It works good. You have to be trained on how to use it in conjunction with a light. And using a handgun in conjunction with a flashlight is a whole can of worms that we're not going to open right now because it's significantly more challenging. It can be done, but it is challenging. Okay, your turn. I'd like to hear your questions. I'd like to hear what you have to say as far as your comments. How did you answer this question? For those who already have answered this question, how do you recommend your friends and family or other beginners answer this question? I'd like to hear them in the comments below, please. If you know somebody, friend or family who's been interested in purchasing one of these guns, go ahead, pass it off to them. Share them with this video, and then they can ask me directly if you have any issues that you want me to specifically address. So that's kind of the material I had handled for you today. There's a few things that I want to touch upon. Pamela also asked me, so she carries a 22 in her pocket, a little 22 caliber handgun. I'm going to comment on this. Generally speaking, no professional in our industry would recommend you use a 22 caliber gun for self-defense. The reason is not because they're not lethal. They're fine in lethality. As I mentioned, I killed a very big pig, 300-pound pig, with one round of 22 LR. And I killed it instantaneously, just like that. It's dead. But it's actually because 22s are very difficult to make accurate. Make reliable. 22s are difficult to make reliable. So, my bad. 22s are difficult to be reliable with. So the only time we can really say go with a 22 would be with a manually operated rifle, like a lever action rifle, if you had nothing else, or a revolver. If you absolutely had to have a small 22 caliber handgun, it would be a revolver, in my humble opinion. But again, I don't recommend that as a first choice. There are so many better calibers that aren't really more difficult to use. They aren't more expensive they're not significantly more expensive, but they're going to give you much better reliability, much better power, much better penetration. Okay, so second thought here is, can you use a plastic gun? Sure, why not? There's many good guns in the modern age. Since 1986, since Glock released their first pistol, there's many good plastic guns. Notice I haven't brought up anything about brands. Guess what, guys? All the brands out there that make guns that are sold on the open market are gonna work. I had a student, an old college friend actually, come to me and said, Brian, I wanted to buy a gun. I'm debating what to get. And he bought a High Point, a 380 caliber High Point. He was saying, did I make a wrong choice? I know a lot of people say bad things about High Points. I'm like, they're fine. High Points are fine. They work okay. Like, there's some challenges because they're kind of bulky. They're kind of hard to find holsters. The safeties work weird. They're kind of hard to take apart. Their magazines don't hold a lot of ammunition. But do they work? They work just fine. So, regardless of your budget, if all you have is $400 or whatever, all you have is $200, you can get something that works for you. If you have $2,000 to spend, you can get something very nice. Maybe a handgun and a rifle and some classes and some ammunition and some accessories. If you have $500 to spend, go get yourself a used semi-automatic handgun and get a class to go with it. $100 for a class, $400 for a used gun. Something like that. There's plenty of good guns out there. I'm not going to really name brands because they all work. So what I will mention is frame size and frame material. Okay, if we look at a traditional gun, this is a full-size gun. A full-size gun meaning it has a 5-inch barrel. This is what we call a duty-size gun. It's something that a military officer or police officer would carry on his belt. Okay. When we look at full-size guns, this one happens to be a single stack, so it's actually very slender. It's very good for people with small hands. If you compare that to a Glock 17 or a more modern double stack gun, you can see how fat this plastic pistol is. There's a big difference in how fat it is. And so if you're going to carry the gun, a skinnier gun does help you. On the other hand, to shoot the gun, you want it the heavier, the better. A heavy gun made out of steel weighs significantly more than a plastic gun that's only half made out of steel. So frame material, for a beginner, you want the heaviest gun you can hold. And again, also for beginners, you want the biggest gun, the longest gun you can hold. So if you want to learn with a 5-inch gun or a 4-inch gun, I would say that would be an appropriate choice. Now, some people are going to want to buy smaller guns, such as when we look at compacts and subcompacts, you can compare these two guns. I'm just putting them together. This is the Glock 26 and the Glock 17. You notice it's the same exact gun. It's just cut shorter. In fact, if I take the Glock 17 magazine, I can directly put in the Glock 26 and they will function. It will work just fine. So when we look at these guns, the shorter guns that are kind of cut down, they tend to be okay compromises. It was like a really big thing in the 80s and 90s. This was a really cool thing. The problem is the ergonomics are not good. They're very fat. They're very short. There's not much to hold. They hold a lot of ammo for how big they are, but like they're heavy and they're kind of lacking on the core metric. When we want to carry a gun, we want it to be slender. We want it to be skinny and well usable. So if we're talking Glocks, Glock 48s and Glock 43s, I'm a big fan of them. I think their ergonomics are just perfect. But there's many good guns out there that could also serve your purposes. And I'm agnostic. I don't care what brand you bring. I'm not really very familiar. I'm not very a big fan of the brands like Taurus and Sky and FMK. So these are some of the budget brands. But they're, for example, Springfield XDS single stack guns. They're just fine, and they're nice and slender. They come in 9mm. You can use that for your self-defense and it'll work just fine. Now, there are then, of course, pocket-sized guns, such as this Glock 42, and you can compare the difference in how thick this is. right? So the bigger one is the Glock 26 I just showed you, and the skinnier one is our Glock 42, and it's significantly smaller. But yet, this is about as small as I would go. Anything smaller than this, and you're gonna be in the territory of very unreliable and very difficult to use. For comparison, these are the 3 sizes of Glock that I have. Glock 17, Glock 26, and Glock 42. You can see their length differences on the top and on the bottom. So the smaller a gun you get, generally speaking, the more difficult it is to use. If we just look at the comparison in how many rounds it carries, our Glock 42 carries 6 in a magazine, our Glock 17 carries 17 rounds in a magazine. This one shoots a weaker, smaller ammunition, this one shoots a slightly more powerful ammunition. That's a big difference. 6 rounds may or may not be enough to stop your bad guy. So you better be darn good with that gun if you want to carry a 6-shot gun or 5-shot gun. It's just a thought. Any questions for me at this point? Small guns, buy them as your second gun. There's not one gun that can do all jobs. Let's just be clear about that. The only gun I could think that maybe could suit all these roles, learning, concealed carry, home defense, target practice, the only gun that I could really conceive that could do that would be XDS and 9mm, Glock 48 and 9mm. Maybe if you really wanted to get a gun that was slender, small, suitable, particularly for a petite hands on a lady, if that's if that's how your body type is built. You're thinking about how to carry this with how you dress, particularly if it's hot in the summertime. You want kind of a smaller, more slender gun, but don't go too small because they're hard to use. So you want a gun that's small enough to carry, but big enough that it's easy to shoot. Somewhere in that, 10 bullets, 9mm, slender, but kind of long. And, light enough to carry, but heavy enough to be steady in the hand if you're really gonna buy a handgun. So when it comes to rifles and shotguns, honestly, there's so many good choices out there. AR-15, of course, takes the top spot in our country. There's nothing wrong with it, but if you're gonna buy one, remember, keep it simple. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Keep all those doodads and flippity-doos and foldy thingies and buttons and switches and electronics and wires and hoses. Keep all that shit off of there. Anything with a screw can and will unscrew itself. No screws, no screws, no screws on your rifle or shotgun. On your shotgun, keep it simple. Keep it light, keep it clean, keep it simple. If you want to buy a shotgun, definitely consider buying in 20 gauge. Consider semi-automatics. Consider pump action guns. Those are both fine. They both work. It's really up to preference. But keep it simple and learn how to use it, right? Nothing that hangs off the side of it. No special rails and red dots on top. No big rails and pistol grips and flashlights and lasers hanging off the side. If you want a flashlight, mount it solidly to the barrel or mount it solidly to the magazine. That's it as far as your accessories. It's the only thing you need. You don't need a bunch of extra shit hanging off your gun. Cool. So I gave you guys a bunch of random tips other than addressing the actual question here. If you have questions, please, and if you want me to clarify, write it in a comment. I'll be happy to do demonstrations, happy to clarify, happy to do follow-on videos. Take care. Signing off. Talk to you soon.